Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Simon here. So tonight, we have something a little different. We're going to be covering our first story in America through a Chinese lens. I'm pretty excited for this one, and I hope you enjoy it. So this next story was an incident that a viewer shared with me. His name is Adam. I turned his experience into a full story, so I hope I did it justice for you, Adam, as I tried my best to retell it in my usual Hong Kong horror style. Adam grew up in New Jersey, in an atheist household, but he's always been somewhat sensitive to spirits and the supernatural growing up. Most of his experiences have been pretty minor and far apart, but it wasn't until he went to college that he experienced something that really scared him and had him questioning everything. As always, please stick around till after the story, as I'm going to break everything down from a Chinese cultural perspective to see what I personally think happened here. Alright, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into this one. This following incident happened to Adam years ago. He still can't explain it, but it's something that's always been stuck in the back of his mind. At the time, he just got into a college in Pennsylvania. He had a lot of high school drama going on in his life during this time. He had a falling out with his close friends over a girl, so he just desperately wanted to leave his hometown and get away from it all. Going to college was his ticket out of his little town, where everyone knew everyone. It would be a fresh start where he could make new friends and just start over, where no one knew him. For the first time in a long time, he was excited for the future. He worked his butt off to get here, and he was proud of himself. He even had a partial scholarship, which would cover a large chunk of his tuition. Starting now, things are going to get better. Things can only go up from here, right? As I've mentioned earlier, Adam always knew he possessed an unwanted gift. He was more sensitive to spirits than most people. He wouldn't say it was too extreme though. He usually can't see the manifestations, but he could usually feel them if they were nearby sometimes. He would occasionally catch glimpses of shadow figures moving in his peripheral vision, but nothing more than that. On Adam's first day on campus, he was assigned to a dorm on the second floor of a building that was extremely old. Like with all freshmen, his roommate was randomly assigned. He would be dorming with a guy from Ohio named Mark. To be totally honest, Adam's first impression of Mark is that he was extremely weird. He doesn't want to be mean, but the first thing that Adam thought of when they first met was, uh-oh, my roommate's a weirdo. Now, Mark seemed like a nice guy and everything, but he was incredibly awkward and uncomfortable speaking with people. He had long hair up to his shoulders, acne, and was a video game lover. Though they were never on bad terms, they didn't really have much in common. They didn't hang out outside of the dorm. To be honest, Mark rarely ever even left his room, except to go to class. Adam wasn't even sure if he had any friends other than himself. For the most part, rooming with Mark was fine. They would talk here and there whenever they were both in the room, and over time, Adam started to get to know Mark on a deeper level. Mark had a pretty rough life before coming to college. Adam thought his life was rough back home, but it was nothing compared to Mark's life. Mark grew up in a broken household. It seemed like most of his life was surrounded by tragedies and death. His dad was killed in a robbery when he was really young, so he was raised by a single mom. A lot of people in his life that he loved eventually died in mysterious ways, and it really took a toll on him growing up, making him extremely introverted. Adam started feeling really bad for this guy. But Adam did notice that Mark had an extremely strange sleep schedule. This guy never sleeps at night. Every single evening, Mark would sit there stiffly at his desk. Adam always assumed that he was up late playing video games or studying or something. But one night, he looked up over to Mark's side of the room to see what he was doing. Mark was just sitting there, staring blankly at his glowing laptop screen, as if trying to fight off sleep. He wasn't playing any game or working on anything in particular. Sometimes, he would have a movie playing on the laptop, but he would just stare blankly at the screen, as if he wasn't even paying attention. It was like he was just waiting for the sun to come up. Only then would he go to bed. Adam didn't say anything though, and figured that Mark was just a night owl who didn't like to sleep at night. This went on for months, until a long holiday weekend. The campus emptied out, and Adam packed a bag to visit his parents, leaving Mark behind in the dorm all by himself. When Adam returned, Mark looked like a hollow shell. Genuinely worried about him now, Adam finally confronted Mark and asked if everything was alright, because he looked like crap. That's when Mark finally confessed the reason why he didn't sleep at night. Mark moved into the dorm a few weeks earlier than Adam because he did a summer start program. It was an optional summer program where freshmen could move in early to take some elective classes to get a bit of a head start. Mark figured that he would do this because he tends to fall behind. He thought that it would be a great idea to give himself a bit of extra time to get ahead and start to settle in before everyone else arrived. Mark had been staying in the room completely alone during this time. One night, he woke up to a strange sensation. It was a crushing, suffocating weight sitting directly on his chest. It was sleep paralysis. He couldn't move at all, but he felt conscious. The weight on his chest grew heavier and heavier as he tried to force his body to move. He also noticed that the temperature in the room started to get colder. Then, all of a sudden, the invisible weight that was pressing down on him shifted. Instead of pressing downward, Mark felt his body slowly peeling away from the mattress as if he was levitating. In his eyes, he was levitating. He described being lifted higher and higher until his nose was right up against the plaster ceiling. He couldn't scream or fight back. He just floated there in silence for a few seconds before it just stopped and he dropped like a discarded rag doll back down onto his bed. Now, honestly, Adam's never felt anything off with the room at all ever since he's moved in. So he just listened and took Mark's story at face value. He tried to brush it off and told Mark that it was probably just his mind playing tricks on him. Living away from home for the first time can be scary, and his brain was probably just playing tricks on him. Then, one night, a few days away from the end of the semester, something happened. Everyone will be moving out within the next 2 days, so these would be his last 2 nights with Mark. Long after the campus had gone quiet, Adam was laying in bed trying to fall asleep, but he was having trouble tonight. For the first time in a while, Mark was actually sleeping. He must have been too tired and couldn't fight it anymore. He was snoring away in bed. The room was suffocatingly dark, but the shades were open, so there was a little bit of light bleeding into the room from the outside. That's when Adam suddenly got the feeling that something was nearby. He hadn't had this feeling in a long time. He slowly followed his instincts and looked up. Up high, crouching on top of the heavy wooden wardrobe on Mark's side of the room, there was a shadow. At first, Adam thought he was just seeing things, because it was so dark. So he just stared at the shadow for a little bit longer as his eyes adjusted. It was definitely still there. It was this dense, pitch black mass, solid and human-shaped, squatting there, hunched over, and it was staring directly at Mark as he was snoring away. Adam's body went entirely rigid, paralyzed by a primal instinct of terror. But he fought through it. He managed to force the desperate whisper out of his throat, calling out to Mark. Hey, Mark, Adam whispered, his voice barely audible. Dude, wake up. Mark didn't move an inch. He laid perfectly still, his back turned, snoring away, not hearing Adam's frantic whispers. Adam couldn't take his eyes off the shadowy entity squatting on top of the wardrobe. That's when something even more terrifying happened. The figure's face slowly came into view as it leaned forward, and the dim glow coming from outside illuminated his face. Adam could see him clearly. It was a man who looked around their age. His skin was discolored and blotchy, and his eyes looked sunken in. He stared at Adam for a few seconds, but it felt like hours. Then, he put up a rotting finger up to his lips and made the shush gesture. That's when a voice projected into Adam's head. He's sure it came from the spirit, but the sound didn't come from its direction. It literally felt like a thought being projected into Adam's head, and it said, "Mind your own business." Then this figure slowly dissolved as if melting into the darkness until it was totally gone. Adam's never been this scared in his life, and he's never physically seen a spirit until now. This was the first and last time he's experienced something as solid as this spirit. After that night, he believed everything Mark told him before. Now, Adam admitted that he was too scared to tell Mark any of what he saw that night. It seemed like whatever it was that he saw, it was warning him not to get involved. He didn't want to get caught up in whatever was happening, especially since the semester was over soon, and he was probably never going to see Mark again. So, Hong Kong Horror family, what do you think happened here to Adam? Please, pause the video here and let me know what you think in the comments below. Alright, so what do I think happened here? Before we break this story apart, I just want to mention that my analysis on this incident may differ quite a bit from some Western beliefs and perspectives. So I invite you to please keep an open mind as I interpret this story through a traditional Chinese cultural lens, which draws heavily on Taoist and Buddhist beliefs. And as always, these are just my personal thoughts on the incident. So there's a lot going on in the story from the details that Adam provides us, and I think this is one of the darker and more dangerous hauntings we've come across. First of all, I do not think this is a simple haunting of the dorm room. This is more targeted, where the entity seems to focus entirely on Mark, not Adam. This is something we call 阴魂斗情, a yin spirit becoming attached to a particular person rather than a location. I'll talk more about the spirit later, but first, I want to touch on Mark's description of his experience where he was lifted up toward the ceiling. There have been many situations in Chinese ghost stories where people describe this exact phenomenon. I do not believe that Mark was actually physically levitated off his bed, even though he felt like he did. In my culture, if you've seen some of my past episodes, our souls are not one single unified piece. It's broken out into different parts. I believe that Mark actually dozed off when he was in bed, and during this time, when he was in between states of being awake and being asleep, a part of his soul that we call the One, which is the ethereal aspect of the soul, was partially separating from his body. This connects to the traditional concept of Samut Sapak, the 3 souls and 7 spirits. The 1 soul is lighter and more spiritual, while the Pak is heavier and tied to the physical body. When a person is sleeping, sick, unconscious, or near death, the 1 is believed to become less firmly anchored. Many people that experience this describe it as being pulled upward and floating near the ceiling. I believe the shadow figure was attempting to influence or draw out Mark's 1. Also, did you notice where this entity was positioned when Adam saw him? He was perched on top of the wardrobe, high above the room. This is actually a really common detail in many similar stories across Asia. Certain spirits are believed to prefer elevated places that are dark, so they love rafters or corners near ceilings. The idea is that yin entities like these prefer to gather in stagnant areas where people rarely look. They like places like this, where yin energy can accumulate. Places where human activity is minimal and stagnation accumulates. We call these spaces seigok. It literally translates to dead corners. Spirits love these spaces because of the trapped energy. Now, do you know what category of spirit this entity belongs to? We've covered some stories with similar types. I think the spirit is what we call yi fu ling. Yi means to rely upon, fu means attachment, and ling means spirit. This type of spirit is an attachment spirit. They attach themselves to living people and remain near them for extended periods of time, playing the long game. Now, a common misconception when people picture these types of spirits is that they're always glued to their target 24/7. This is not usually how they operate. Yes, they are seen as the parasites of the spirit world, but unlike real parasites like ticks and tapeworms, they do not remain attached to the host the whole time. The attached spirit usually remains near the person, rather than literally inside or on them the whole time. It can come and go, even remain dormant for long periods of time. And it's very good at remaining hidden and dormant, where it will only manifest under certain conditions. I think this is why Adam, who is normally sensitive to spirits, couldn't sense this spirit for months. Being spiritually sensitive does not mean that Adam will notice every single spirit around him. Every situation is different and depends on several factors like the strength of the spirit, the sensitivity level of the person, and whether the spirit wants to be perceived. I think that the reason Adam never saw the spirit is because it seemed to be most active when Mark goes to sleep. Most of the time, Mark slept during the day when Adam was already outside the dorm. It was also daytime when Mark slept, so the spirit may have chosen not to manifest. In many of these attachment spirit stories, the entity usually becomes active only when the host enters a vulnerable state like sleep. I believe sleep, combined with nighttime, is the sweet spot for this spirit to become active. I think Mark knew that as well, because he tried his best to avoid sleeping at night. I honestly think the spirit has been attached to Mark for a long time now. He didn't just pick it up when he came to college. I think it's most likely been with him for many years already, if not more. But he just never realized until recently. It's mentioned that Mark's life growing up was surrounded by lots of death and misfortunes, making him socially isolated and withdrawn. These are the perfect conditions for these types of spirits to find an opening to latch onto. Now, for the most part, these parasitic spirits do not want their host to die, because they use them as a daily energy source, an anchor. But the problem is that the host always suffers anyway. It's been slowly draining Mark's life force over the years, getting stronger, while Mark, on the other hand, gets weaker. the boundary between them gradually thins as time goes on. Once this happens, it's like a domino effect. Once Mark's yang energy is weak enough, the spirit encounter becomes easier. This encounter then creates more fear, which weakens his yang energy even more, which allows for more frequent encounters. It becomes like a snowball effect, a cycle. There's a Chinese expression, 阳衰阴盛, yang declines, yin flourishes. It does not mean the person is dying. It means the balance is shifting. As the person's vitality decreases, yin influence gains a greater foothold. A simple way to think about this is a wall separating a room. On one side, the spirit lives. On the other side, Mark lives. Over time, as the spirit slowly becomes stronger while Mark becomes weaker, this wall starts disappearing, and eventually, what was once hidden now becomes visible. Now, Mark never told Adam that he saw this figure, but I think it's only a matter of time. Now, you might be wondering, is this spirit conscious? Is it malevolent? Yes, I believe this spirit is totally conscious. There's a lot of details here that point us in that direction. It notices that Adam is able to see it. It makes eye contact with Adam. It even makes a deliberate gesture and communicates a message to him. There's perception here. There's intention, as well as decision making. This is not residual haunting or looping behavior. This is far from it. I think the balance in this relationship has shifted too much already, where it's not balanced anymore. In most cases, with these yifuling, attachment spirits, they don't have a master plan from day one to possess someone. But over time, the relationship evolves. As it slowly becomes off-balanced, they start off simply being attached and dependent on the host for energy. But over time, the boundary between the spirit and the living person becomes increasingly blurred. The problem is that the spirit becomes more dominant as the host becomes weaker. Over time, the relationship becomes less of a spirit attached to a person and more of the spirit sharing a space with the person. This is dangerous because it can eventually lead to something we call dutse, which translates to seizing the dwelling, which pretty much means possession. I think this is what's happening to Mark, unfortunately. It's a gradual possession. Full possessions rarely happen overnight. It's a process. There's usually a long period before a person's personality begins changing. If not dealt with, the spirit will gradually occupy more psychological and spiritual territory. An easy way to think about this is to imagine Mark and the spirit, each on one side of a seesaw. The spirit doesn't have to gain enormous power. Mark only has to lose enough strength, and the balance will shift the other side. Now, with that said, I don't think the spirit was in the final stages of possession, because Adam saw it perched on top of the wardrobe. If this was the final stages of possession, the spirit would already be attached to Mark. So I believe that this was only the intermediate stage of the process. It was already acting possessive of Mark, warning Adam to mind his own business. In these stories, the most dangerous moment is not when the spirit first appears. It's when it's hard to distinguish where the person ends and the spirit begins. We don't know what happened to Mark after the story, since Adam and him lost touch after freshman year. But I do hope that he was able to find some help and break this attachment before it got any further. Thank you, Hong Kong Horror family, for finishing this episode. I hope you enjoyed our first American story, broken down from a Chinese perspective. Until we speak again next week, good night.